right. Oh, looks like go back one slide. There's the little arrows at the bottom, I think can help you go back, Barb. In the bottom left corner.
Okay.
There it is. Great.
Perfect. All right. As also just started recording, and Becky, you can go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Caitlin, for inviting me here to present tonight. I'm very excited to share some information about one of my favorite topics, which is native plants. And I also like to talk about invasive species because it's really important not to plant invasive species in our backyards. So let me start off by introducing everyone and defining a native plant. So a native plant is considered to have occurred here in the United States prior to European colonization. And because of the long evolutionary relationship that a native plant has formed with its environment, it is adapted to local conditions, including the local soil and climate. It has natural defenses to local diseases and pests. And over evolutionary time, it has formed very complex relationships with other plants and with animals. And as an important part of the ecosystem, native plants support our native pollinators and our native wildlife, and they support biodiversity. So next slide is going to be what is a non-native plant. So non-native plants have been introduced by humans from other regions around the world or other regions within our own country, outside of our state, or even outside of specific ecosystems found within our state's political borders. Some non-native plants are friendly, meaning they play nice in the environment with other plants and animals. Some non-native plants have what we call ecological significance. They may provide food such as berries and nuts and seeds for birds, or nectar and pollen for pollinators. They may provide erosion control, or they may offer other services to us humans, which we call ecosystem services. An example of a non-native plant that is commonly planted in our local gardens is this beauty right here, purple coneflower. And purple coneflower is actually native to the prairies of Midwestern United States. It provides nectar and pollen to our native bees and to other pollinators, and it provides seeds for birds. Another example. Oops.
What happened to here?
There we go. Thank you. So another example of a non-native but friendly plant is Gladiolus. Very beautiful. Gladiolus come from Africa, the Middle East, and the Mediterranean. And gladiolas not only provide beauty in the garden, but importantly, like purple coneflower, they are not an aggressive grower. They do not take up space and use up resources needed by other native plants. Growing gladiolas in your garden, planting among your other predominantly native plants is absolutely okay. And then finally, I want to introduce you to an invasive species. So what is an invasive species? Some plants are not native, not friendly, and are considered invasive species, such as Calorie pear, pictured here. Beautiful, but invasive. Butterfly bush is a favorite plant commonly planted in people's gardens. Burning bush, Japanese barberry, purple loosestrife are all examples of invasive species. So an invasive species is a non-native plant whose introduction causes or is likely to cause harm to the environment and or the economy. Invasive species outcompete other plants for resources and take over the land. They use up a lot of space. They're very aggressive. They can choke out and strangle native trees and shrubs. And because they did not evolve in the new landscape in which they live, many of them provide very little, if any, ecological value. Some invasive species that do provide food resources, such as berries eaten by birds, unfortunately, because birds are such excellent seed dispersers, those seeds are actually spread far and wide, and the growth of these invasives become overwhelming to the natural landscapes and are literally changing the native forests and our meadows and grasslands and wetlands, and they're changing the natural ecosystems of our region. And most of the time we don't know it because we don't frequent these places, middle of the woods, a forest somewhere far away. The birds frequent those places, but we don't. So invasive species are a detriment to the ecological integrity of our planet as we know it. Not only are plants from Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Mediterranean invading our native ecosystems, but our North American plants are invading those areas around the world as well. So now Steve and Jesse are going to introduce you to 12 tenacious invasive species.
Okay, thank you so much. And I'm going to turn it over to Jessie Connor, and she'll take it from here and describe the, it wasn't easy coming up with only 12 invasive species to talk about, but we managed to agree on this dozen. So here's Jessie Connor.
Yeah, so here are the top 12. This one you might be very familiar with, Japanese barberry. This is a plant that's ubiquitous. It's planted locally in every new bank that's been put in, or store or building, which is really unfortunate because it spreads very readily. It grows about 3 to 6 feet, and you can see that it has different color forms. So the one on the left is the leaves are burgundy color. On the right, same plant, a barberry. Its leaves are green, they're spatulate, and you can see the little yellow flowers dangling below, and the yellow flowers are going to turn into red berries, which get eaten by the birds and disperse. And this is very shade tolerant. You see it here growing in the sun. You may have it in your backyard in the sun, but it's also very shade tolerant. And what happens is in a lot of natural protected areas and forests throughout New England and going south, you'll see this plant as the understory. Deer don't eat it. And so it spreads and spreads and spreads. And it's also been noted in research that it's a place where ticks are very predominant. So bad for a lot of reasons. It's still being sold in nurseries. And this is something we would like to prevent happening in New Jersey. The next plant is, oh yeah, an alternative for this would be Virginia sweet spire, which is a gorgeous plant. A native, has wonderful colored leaves in the fall and beautiful 6-inch long flower, hanging flower spikes in the spring, and wildlife value as well. Asian bittersweet. Probably many of you are familiar with bittersweet climbing up trees, especially when it's fruiting in the fall with the yellow fruits and the bright red berries. It's really problematic in the landscape because whereas the vine itself is not as robust as some of the others we're going to talk about, it tends to twine around itself and climb up shrubs and trees and can eventually pull them down. The leaves are round, kind of orbicular, and slightly toothed. And a good way to recognize it is demonstrated in the middle picture. You can see that the root is orange. So if you have this growing in your yard as a little sapling and you pull it up, look for that orange root, and that'll help you to identify it. This is one you certainly want to get rid of. And this is a good time of the year to go around and try to identify this plant as it comes up. I'm sure all of you are familiar with English ivy. The kind of surprising thing from our point of view is that people encourage and put up with English ivy growing up their trees, because as you can see in the picture on the left, what will happen eventually is that the English ivy will outcompete the tree and will cause it to die. It's evergreen. A lot of our invasive plants are semi-evergreen or evergreen, and that gives them a boost throughout the winter, makes them outcompete some of our natives. And English ivy, as you know, can grow in the understory. It can go up as a vine and spreads rapidly. And one of the things you might want to remember about English ivy is it has two different forms. So on the right is what we're used to seeing. But as it matures and goes up a tree, or even as a ground cover, the leaves change shape. They lose their pointedness and become kind of rounder. At that point, it flowers and seeds. The birds eat the seeds and it's spread around. So this is a plant that we would encourage people to get rid of so that the native trees underneath it have a chance. An alternative is Allegheny spurge, a Pachysandra. We have a native Pachysandra that's a beautiful, beautiful evergreen plant that is the very first thing in at least my garden to bloom in the spring. It blooms in March. Probably everyone's familiar with Japanese or Chinese wisteria too. This is one that is more robust and can really do trees and shrubs in pretty quickly. You're going to notice it when it's blooming in April and into May. It has large compound leaves. The vines trail along the ground. It's one that's somewhat challenging to get rid of, but the environmental impact is that the vines girdle the trees, and they change the structure of the forest by killing the trees and altering the light that's available to the forest floor. We have a native wisteria, but it's very unlikely that you will see it, and it's very rare to find it in a garden center. It blooms much later, and the flower is much smaller. An alternative is Dutchman's pipe, and Dutchman's pipe is a host plant for the pipe vine swallowtail. It's a really easy vine to grow, and the species that's up on the screen is one that I've grown for 25 years and have not had any problems with it escaping or invading other parts of my yard. Mugwort. Eek. I don't know. This isn't, they're all bad. They're all bad. This is a perennial. So we've been talking a lot about vines and shrubs. This is a perennial. But it's one that I hope you're not, you don't have in your own yard. We certainly have it on the roadside and in our wildlife refuges and everywhere else. You can recognize it because it might remind you of Dusty Miller. It's an Artemisia. And it has this kind of smell and the feel of Dusty Miller, which is an annual plant that a lot of people plant in their front yards. As you can see on the right, it's very heavily lobed. And if we were to turn one of these leaves over, it would be very white, hairy on the underside. And that's a really good way to recognize it. Also, when you crush it, it has a kind of a sage-like smell. It forms dense colonies in open areas and restricts the growth of native species, causing a decline in diversity. It's one that's hard to get rid of because care needs to be taken that every single little piece of root is removed. Japanese honeysuckle. Okay. This is one that many of you are probably familiar with too, or at least the smell of it, because it smells beautiful when it's in bloom. And like the other vines we've been talking about, it does damage to the ecosystem. And you can see the Japanese honeysuckle on the left is climbing up part of a support for a telephone pole, and then overtaking the trees and shrubs as it goes. Japanese honeysuckle is also happy just climbing around on the ground until it finds something that it can climb up and become more dense. So it can girdle saplings by twining around them. Again, it's not too robust, but the tree is very, the vine itself is not too thick, but all of the mats of them together form a canopy that disturbs the native plant community below. This is actually a really good time of the year to go out and have a go at removing Japanese honeysuckle if you have it. I did a little walk around the yard today, and as much as I've been trying to get rid of it, I have neighbors that have some, and I still have some, and it's semi-evergreen, so you can see it right now. And it's fairly easy to pull up when the soil's moist, not frozen, but moist. And it's a good time to pull it up because you don't have the other plants competing with it. You can really see it and you can really work at getting each piece of it out. It's still sold locally under the name Hall's honeysuckle. And a native alternative is coral honeysuckle, which is a fantastic, beautiful red flowered, orangish red flowered honeysuckle that is well behaved. It's one of the few vines that I can recommend that doesn't take over the world and is well behaved, and has a very long season of bloom, and also is a host plant for some the clearing moth, among other insects. Becky mentioned Calorie pear, Bradford pear. That has become a real disaster in the last, I'm going to say 20 years. It was originally thought to be sterile and sold and incorporated into landscapes everywhere. Landscapers still seem to love this plant. And you can see it lining streets and highways. But in more recent years, it has spread. And as it spread, it puts out thorns on the trees, and it forms thickets, which are pretty impenetrable. It's become a real problem. A good alternative for this a shrub, small tree that also blooms in the spring is serviceberry, which is one of the first, I'm going to say, large shrubs to bloom in the spring with lovely white flowers. And serviceberry provides wonderful berries for the birds, which they gobble up and outcompete each other for. Okay, I'm being told I have to go faster, so I'm going to tell you less about these nasty invasives. Norway maple, you all know what this is. It's the large maple planted in front of lots of yards in town, and one that has in southern New Jersey, and one that has invaded forests as well. If you're not sure if you have Norway maple as opposed to red maple, if you pull off a stem, it will be milky. And this one is bright yellow in the fall. It's one that we don't want to buy in a garden center. We want to encourage our neighbors not to buy as well. And red maple would be a far better alternative. Multiflora rose. Probably you are familiar with this, blooming in the spring. We have a couple of native roses. You are unlikely to be seeing those as much as this multiflora rose, which is everywhere. It has large thorns on it. It is somewhat difficult to get rid of, but not impossible and worthwhile, because it does form canes that arch over and continue to spread and disrupt habitat. And a great alternative would be summer sweet or plethora, sweet pepperbush, a wonderful shrub, terrific value for insects and pollinators. Tree of heaven. Okay. They were going from bad to worse here. Tree of heaven grows really fast. In my yard, it goes from nothing to 5 feet in 1 year. And then I pull it out quickly. It forms colonies, dense colonies. It is the host plant for the spotted lanternfly. They have other host plants, but they seem to prefer this one. It's one that we would encourage everyone to try to get rid of in their yard, especially with the problem being a host plant at this moment in time. It has large compound leaves, and when you crush the leaves, it has an unpleasant aroma. So that might help you to tell it apart from sumac, which is a native plant that has a lot of wildlife value. Autumn olive. This is a plant that was promoted to act as windbreaks. It's a very thorny plant with grayish white leaves, yellow flowers, and then berries. And it's because of its thorns and the fact that it makes thickets, it's rather difficult to get rid of. But again, it's really damaging habitat wherever it is. And it's one that if it's in your yard, it would be well worthwhile getting rid of so that it doesn't spread and continue to come up everywhere in your yard. And bayberry would be a good alternative. Bayberry also has the advantage of being evergreen or semi-evergreen. Okay. Japanese knotweed. Some people consider this the worst of the invasives at this moment in time because it's so highly adaptable. We usually see it, it's actually a herbaceous perennial. And we usually see it in wet areas, but it can grow in full sun. It can grow in salty situations. It can put up with flooding. It can put up with everything. And it grows, it can grow up to 10 feet in a year from very aggressive underground rootstock. And you can see it has these pretty flowers, towards the fall, towards the late summer, but it's very aggressive, spreads very rapidly, and it's kind of like bamboo and in its structure, and it's a challenging one to get rid of. Okay, I think we did 10. We could have done, we did 12. We could have done, we could have done 20. And Barb, do you want to say how people can get this brochure if they want?
The information is up
Okay,
on the screen
perfect.
right now.
Okay, yeah, I recommend you get it. There's a lot more information in it than I was able to pass on to you. And I will pass this on to.
All right, thanks, thanks, Jesse. I'll
Sure.
put that link for the invasive brochure. I think that's it. Go Green Galloway Invasive Plant Species. It has the video, 12 tenacious invasives, and the invasive species brochure too. So thanks so much. And also thanks, Becky, for kind of giving us an intro into what invasives are and why they're a problem. So that's also very important. So now I'm going to turn it over to Karen Walzer, who's going to discuss an amazing website, the Jersey Friendly Yards website. It's a great resource for finding alternative plants, building your yard, do's and don'ts. So Karen, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Caitlin. And thanks for having me here today. Yeah, the Jersey Friendly Yards website has this wonderful plant database that will really help you choose native plants to
Hey, Karen?
replace. Yeah.
Your audio is a little funny. I'm not sure why. Maybe try turning off your camera.
Yeah, let me try that.
Okay. It sounds like it's like your voice is vibrating or something.
Okay, I turned it off. Is that helping?
It's still hear it, but we can understand what you're saying. So
I'll try to talk louder, and if that's not working, then I'll turn it over to Becky. I had a similar problem the other night. Is it better now?
It's about the same, but we'll I think it'll be okay because we yeah, I can still understand everything you're saying, so should be good. Hopefully it works itself out.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll try to talk loud.
Okay.
And so the plant database is a tool on the Jersey Friendly Yards website, which was created back in and launched back in 2015 as a resource for everyone throughout the state to use to learn how to landscape in a way that's better for the environment. And it was actually a grant that came from DEP to Barnegat Bay Partnership, which is where I work, to create the website because we're very concerned about clean water, and native plants help immensely with that, as well as other landscaping techniques that you can use to protect the environment. So as part of this website, we created this searchable plant database to help people find plants that are low maintenance, easy to care for, and the majority of plants in this database are actually native plants. So one thing I wanted to show quickly before I forget, so they're in alphabetical order. There's more than 400 plants in this database. But there are a few that we put in here that are invasive plants for the very reason that if people go searching for them, let me move up a little bit, you can, yeah.
It's still pretty, your audio's, I thought it was at one point gonna get a little bit better. It kind of sounded like it, but it's about the same.
Oh my gosh. All right, Becky, how about if I stop sharing and then Becky will take over? Sorry about that, everybody.
That's okay. No, yeah, you sounded fine earlier.
Yeah, I don't know. A similar thing happened the other night, and it's a mystery. Can't figure out why.
No problem. Becky, do you mind taking over?
Sure, no problem.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. So I brought up the Jersey Friendly Yards plant database. Are you able to see that okay?
Yep, looks good.
Okay, great. So this is obviously the same website that Karen was just sharing, the Jersey Friendly Yards website, jerseyyards.org. And she was just on the Jersey Friendly Plant database. So if you go to the top blue ribbon under Jersey Friendly Plants and click on Jersey Friendly Plant database, here it is. Really excellent website. And Karen was starting to show you that in this plant database, we have over 400 different species, and most of them are native species. We do have some non-native species, as I was talking about earlier. Non-native species are okay as long as they have provide ecological value to birds or butterflies or pollinators, etc. And then we do, as Karen was just saying, have some invasive species in our list only because we want to bring attention to their status if somebody should search for them. So Karen was just about to show you on the left-hand side, we have these search filters here. And you can actually search for a specific plant. And I believe she was going to be searching for Norway Maple, which is a really gorgeous tree. I have a couple of them in my yard, but it's a highly invasive species. We didn't know it many, many years ago when they were first brought over, which is the case with many invasive species. We don't know it until the cat's out of the bag, but it's an invasive species. It's a prodigious seeder, so it creates lots and lots of different seed, seed pods, the samaras that helicopter down from the tree, and then before you know it, you have lots of tiny little Norway maple seedlings all over the yard. We don't really see them because we probably mow the lawn, and then anything that starts to grow, we don't see it, but they're there. And if they escape into the wild, as Jesse was talking about earlier, they proliferate and we'll have a whole forest full of Norway maples or Japanese barberry or Calorie pear. So if you come to a plant like this, an invasive species, we'll show it to you. And then we actually provide some alternatives, much like Jessie was offering earlier. Every time she showed an invasive plant, she offered an alternative native. So here's a couple excellent native alternatives to the invasive Norway maple. We have our beautiful red maple, sugar maple, silver maple, black gum, not a maple, but another similar type plant, sweet gum, one of my favorite plants. And then you can click on any of these, and then you can go to their particular page in the plant database and find out all kinds of great information with a big description and lovely plant details about this specific native plant, and see if it's appropriate for the conditions in your own yard. So you can search for a plant using that, find a species plant, find a specific plant. I'm going to X out of that. You can also, of course, use the plant database and just enter all the conditions in your own yard. You can search for a particular plant type if you're looking for a tree. You can search for natives only if you want to do that. Bloom color, bloom time. If you have deer trouble, you can click on deer resistance, something that attracts wildlife. Most of these native plants do, of course, because they evolve together and have a wonderful relationship to support each other. You want to certainly add what light conditions you have in your yard. You want to add soil type. Down here in South Jersey, we have sandy soil, soil pH, soil moisture. If you want drought tolerance, or if you live near the coast, you can enter all these. And as you can see, the database gets smaller and smaller. The selection gets smaller and smaller as you click on more choices. And this is everything I just clicked: a tree, native, shady area, sandy soil. And then we have our selection over here. And you can click on any of these. Flowering dogwood, there's a favorite, and you can read all about this particular plant in the database, the plant details, and anything that you didn't click on, it will still show up here in the database and give you all those great details about the plant, as well as the description. So that's our plant database. If you use that as a tool to find plants to plant in your yard, we encourage you to register first. That way you can actually save your list and print it out and take it with you to the nursery, and you'll have your trees and flowers and vines and anything else you check off on your list that you want to purchase. I also wanted to show you over here, we actually have a whole page called Avoid Invasive Plants. And there you can read a little bit more about invasive plants and why. We have a whole webinar this evening about invasive plants and really the detriment they cause to our native ecosystems, woodlands, meadows, grasslands. They really do take over. And this is a nice list of some top invasive plants, and I bet there's some overlap here with these plants that Jessie just introduced to you in her wonderful PowerPoint program. Yep, there's a couple right there she introduced. Also on this page is the Invasive Species Strike Team, the New Jersey Invasive Species Strike Team. So if you click there, you'll head to their website and learn a little bit about this wonderful group that that's their main focus is on invasive species in New Jersey. And they also have a wonderful New Jersey Invasive Species Strike Team Do Not Plant list. So again, if you are not sure about what to plant in your yard, you can go to the Jersey Friendly Yards website, or you can go to the Friends of Hopewell Valley Open Space website that hosts the Invasive Species Strike Team. And you can find a lot of great links to plants such as this one, plants on the list that are commonly available for purchase that you shouldn't purchase. So that's definitely an issue that we hope to address with this program. So back to our Jersey Friendly Yards page, a couple more quick things I want to show you. Resources for homeowners. If you're looking for a couple things on this area right here on this page right here. Again, you can access the Invasive Species Strike Team under the Invasive Plants title. And then also under Organic Land Care, if you're looking for someone to help you plant or plan your native landscape, you can go to the Rutgers, New Jersey Agricultural Experiment Station, find a landscaper page. And all these landscapers have taken the Rutgers Organic Land Care course, and then they have the option of getting their name and their company in this wonderful database here. So you can actually select a county that you live in and search for a landscaper that will actually have knowledge about organic land care and native species. So great resource right here. And another great resource on the Jersey Friendly Yards website is where to buy natives. So if you want to do it yourself, you can go to where to buy native plants once you've got your list in your hand from using the plant database. Again, you can go by county, and we have lots of different nurseries or places that sell plants. We try to vet them as much as we possibly can to make sure that they sell predominantly native plants. They may be entirely native or maybe native, but a little bit of non-native, those ecologically friendly, but we really try to make sure that they don't sell invasive species. So this is my county right here, Ocean County, and we have a couple of really good ones here, but you can find your own county and then click on websites and explore places that do sell native plants. I also want to show you, you can connect with us. You can actually email Karen Walzer. This goes directly to her. If you click on that little email envelope right there, she'll get your email and answer your question as quickly as possible. You can also click on Ask an Expert if you have a question about a specific plant, or maybe just about anything, a question about soil, or a question about water resources, or maybe you have an insect or some unidentified insect pest that's eating your plants. You can fill this very short form out, select your county, and your question, if you want to upload a photo, your question and photo, once you submit it, will go right to the master gardeners of that particular county. So we have a great relationship with the master gardeners of all the different county extensions in New Jersey. And I really encourage you to come to the Jersey Family Yards website and look around and learn a little bit more about invasive species as well as native plants that you can plant in your yard. So I'll turn it back over to you, Caitlin. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Becky. Karen, hopefully, I think your sound's okay, maybe for answering some questions. But thank you for that overview, Becky, of the Jersey Friendly Yards website. I'm gonna put the website in the chat. All the links that we mentioned, I'll try to put in the chat box for you guys to, so you have that and can explore on your own after the webinar. So, okay, well, I think that's it for our presenters. We will open it up to questions and also mention any other things, any events coming up or other actions that you can take, to prevent invasive plants from growing within our watersheds in New Jersey. So feel free to put your question in the chat box. Feel free to take yourself off mute and answer your question or ask your question that way. But we'll open it up. So any questions at this time? No questions so far. Jesse, you made me laugh when you said that Japanese barberry is at every bush, every bank. That bush is particularly, for some reason, planted whenever there's a new bank that pops up. So I do wonder why specific plants are in specific, landscaping. Do you know why that happens? Like why they would resort to specific plants when a new building comes up, or are they easy to maintain and don't realize they're invasive? So that was something I was wondering, if like landscapers have like their specific go-to plants when new construction comes up.
I think the cynical answer is landscapers have their particular go-to plants, and it's not a very deep repertoire of plants. And a lot of them are the plants that we've talked. I mean, Bradford pear is another go-to plant, so that it's just what landscapers have been doing for the last 30, 40 years and continue to do. Barberry with the purplish leaves adds a little bit of interest, and sometimes the old school way of looking at a plant is by looking at it in terms of the color of the leaves. That's what you want, or some characteristic in terms of its form. When I know that people that are listening to this presentation are more interested in what does the plant do for an environmental, from an ecological point of view. But landscapers haven't. I hope we don't have a landscaper listening. I'm glad that Rutgers is training some of them, but unfortunately, I have a criticism that many landscapers are not as aware as we wish they were about choosing plants that are not invasive and have some ecological value.
Yeah, that's interesting. All right, thank you. We do have another question that kind of goes in conjunction with something else that we were wondering. The question is, what can be done to prevent stores, primarily big box stores, selling invasives. Lowe's, for example, sells invasive they tag the plants, but still sell them. I know there's some legislation in Delaware that was passed, and potentially maybe that might happen in New Jersey. Does anyone want to speak to that or know more information about that when it comes to, these stores selling them?
Well, the Delaware plan, actually a law that they're phasing in, covers 37 invasive species plants, and many of them are, matter of fact, all of the ones that we had in the film are in there, plus a bunch more. So Dr. Calorie was a consultant on that project with the governor and the legislature in Delaware. And we certainly look up to that project and hope that something like that can take hold here. Currently, there's not a whole lot happening except for the new legislation that was passed that's akin to the Jersey Fresh and Jersey Grown program, where they are supposed to suggest, by putting tags on plants at big box stores and elsewhere, that which ones are native and why they are recommended. But there's kind of a toothless approach at this time. And you mentioned Mike Van Cleef. That piece that he put out in 2007 is still a kind of a seminal piece that really didn't go anywhere, but it still could be used, I think, as a model here for a legislation that had some backbone to it. So aside from the neonics bill, which is good that got passed, and the suggestion through the similar to the native Jersey Fresh program, we're a little bit behind the 8 ball, and we can look to Delaware to maybe give us a cue. And I think Maryland is headed in that direction as well.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. All right. Another question in the chat from Christine. Not that I'm accepting responsibility, but many invasive plants are a result of early soil erosion control practices, fast growing, quick spreading, giving immediate ground cover and control erosion. Yeah, I feel, that's happened in many ways in the past, where one solution, we're experiencing issues from past solutions to problems, right? So that's a really interesting point, Christine. And mentioned something about native plants law that was passed in last month and approved. Christine, did you want to speak a little bit more about that? Was that in New Jersey?
Hi, this is Christine. Hi, Steve, and hi, Barbara.
Hello.
How are you?
Good.
Just like Steve said, though, I mean, it is the native plants law that was just passed. It really has no teeth. It is basically a labeling program where plants will be labeled much like the Jersey Fresh through the Department of Ag. So it definitely needs more push behind it. Again, the work that the Native Plant Society does, and Go Green Galloway, and every other Jersey Friendly Yards, of course, all these efforts have to keep working at it, because it is, Home Depot, the big box stores, don't want to name any names. It's supply and demand, really. They wouldn't have a barberry readily available for a landscaper to come in and buy 30 plants at a clip if it wasn't a quick, easy, they know it'll survive in a island in a parking lot of everywhere in New Jersey. If they had the alternatives, I think that, and we could do some outreach, a meaningful outreach to the landscape community, we may see a change. So it's just, we have to just keep at it. That's all I can say. It's, hindsight is 2020. Soil erosion, again, I'm not taking responsibility, but historically, all these plants, but that's what you want. You want ground cover because you don't want the soil washing away into your surface waters and causing non-point source pollution.
Mhm.
So the idea was quickly, let's stabilize it. And of course, invasives are very good at stabilizing quickly. So it's going to, we have to just keep at it. That's all I can say about that. But I think all these efforts help. And then all, historically, just from a cultural point of view, the bringing in the settlers and early European settlers into North America, wisteria was the plant that my grandmother had. And English ivy was also the plant that my grandmother had in her yard. And because it was reminiscent of, Europe.
Yeah.
And as Becky said, not just plants that are invading other parts of the world now. Blue claw crab, one of the coastal New Jersey favorite seafood species, is now an invasive species in the Mediterranean.
Mhm.
So it all becomes sort of relative.
Yeah.
We just have to kind of remember that, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's happening elsewhere around the world. And, back to your comment about past quick solutions, I know Phragmites is also one of those plants that's being talked about as soil erosion control potentially as well, which also is is incredibly invasive as well. So yeah, all good points. Anybody else want to have a question to ask?
I was going to chime in
Yeah.
on what you and Christine have been talking about in terms of the new legislation and tagging plants that are native. I see that as a really hopeful thing. It's not enough, but we've all gone into garden centers. I can remember going into a garden center that I was trying to support. It was a new place, and say, do you have any natives? And the woman said, they're all native. It's like, oh no. So I bring that up as an example of this is an opportunity for people who work in garden centers and haven't been made aware in the past that there are native plants and non-native plants. And if the garden centers are smart enough to group those natives together, it might help to educate both the personnel who work there and then the consumers who come in. And there's an opportunity to, bring attention to the value of native plants if it's done well. So I'm a little bit hopeful about that.
Yeah. No, good point. I know also Becky put in the chat New Jersey Strategic Management Plan for Invasive Species and a link there. So thanks, Becky. Christine, Jersey Friendly Yards, bring your lists. Yep. That's good that you can do that. I like that feature, how you can print it out and you can go to, maybe even one of those big box stores and say, hey, I want these. Or other nurseries, maybe, smaller, small business nurseries and ask for these specifically. I think that's a great feature on the website. There's many great features on the website.
Caitlin, if I can build on something that Jesse said, or what you're talking about now too, when you go to your store and you have your Jersey Friendly Yard plant list in hand, it actually has both the common name and the scientific name. And so often our plants are related all around the world. So they might share a similar genus, which is the first name in the two-word nomenclature, a genus and a specific epithet together make the species. So you have to see both words in order to know exactly what plant it is, to know that that's the native. Whereas if you have that in your hand and you match those two words to the plant you're purchasing, there's no way to, accidentally purchase the invasive species. Whereas if you're only using either the common name or just the genus even, you may accidentally purchase an invasive species.
Yeah.
So that's just another tool and another, point of education that we need to educate the public about. Not that they need to memorize the scientific names, but to know that you need to have that with you or have the knowledge that that's an important part of the equation of making sure. you
Absolutely, yeah.
purchase the-
Yeah, good point. Right, yeah, you mentioned there's, so many different kinds of maple earlier. Good ones, bad ones, and if you just go and get a maple, you could have a really, could purchase the wrong one. But also scientific names are important to have too, to have both of those, genus and species as well. So we are at time. I do want to give just a little bit of time towards if there's any opportunities for folks to get involved in, as far as like community action events that anyone wants to mention it now. I mean, otherwise there is a lot you can do on your own using the website, using the brochures, the task force that Becky talked about. There's a lot of great resources for people to take home and to take to your own garden. I've used the Jersey Friendly Yards website plenty of times for my own yard. I met native plant nursery companies. So it's been very helpful for me personally. But anything else anybody want to mention before we sign off tonight?
I just wanted to mention that I think hopefully we've all had the pleasure of hearing Dr. Calorie speak, very inspirational, and certainly as a template to move us all forward is the Homegrown National Park initiative. So that kind of knits us all together, and anyone that you speak with, you can talk that language. If anyone has certainly read Bringing Nature Home or Nature's Best Hope or the Nature of Oaks or any of his books, or heard him speak, I think that is something we can all aspire to. So Homegrown National Park, certainly .org, I guess it is. Just look it up and you can put your own yard on the map. They say get on the map, and you can enter your data and how you improve your project. Here in Galloway, we actually entered Galloway municipal property, and we're expanding as we make progress throughout the township. So please, everybody, spread the word on that for Dr. Calorie and his initiative.
All right, yeah, I'll put that link in the chat too. Anyone else have anything else they want to mention? I have one link as well to share with everybody. If you aren't sure what kind of plants you have in your yard to start, there's a great app. You probably have heard of it through iNaturalist. It's called Seek. I use that to identify lots of things in my yard. You can take a picture of it and it can tell you what you have growing. I know I've used this with teachers a few times, and they've used it with their students, around their school. And sometimes you even find invasives in your own yard or school grounds using that app too. So that can be really helpful as well.
I think Becky had a question. Becky had a comment.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a great app. I love that Seek app. I also just wanted to mention real quick that we have a Jersey Friendly Yards webinar every month on the second Tuesday of the month. And we do record them whenever we can. We just did one on planting before you plant, and then we have one coming up on starting with healthy soil, and we'll have one that follows what we call our 8 steps to a Jersey Friendly Yard for the rest of this year, once a month. And I just put the link in the chat to get to that page on our Jersey Friendly Yards website where you can register for those programs. And then I also want to give a plug to the Native Plant Society, who Steve and Jesse and Barbara are representing, one of the organizations they're representing tonight, that they also have wonderful programs monthly.
And Becky will be speaking at our next program on next Monday.
Oh, how cool.
We're just all connected.
Yeah.
And we're looking forward to it. It's going to be great.
It will be a lot of fun.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming tonight. I want to thank our speakers for a fantastic job. Round of applause for everything, your presentations, your information, resources, and all the questions that you answered tonight. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for attending. Hopefully we'll see you at the next Jersey, or I almost said Jersey Friendly Yards, Friends Along the Mullica presentation series, which is next month, I believe on the 23rd. It's about stormwater management, and we'll talk to you soon. And thanks. Have a good night, everybody. And
Thank you so much.
Caitlin, thank you to JC Neer. Wonderful.
Absolutely.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
night.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.